create a new one, or you're going to have to go with it, good or bad, for what it is. Which is it going to be?
Well, what it's going to be is that if you continually use a system that has not worked for black people in this state, you must begin to make that system adjust, as we did in Howard Beach. The three of us were involved at the forefront there, which got your next guest his job. And that was the only racial case in which we were able to get a measure of justice. Only a measure because two of them are still free. But the fact of the matter, Ted, is this girl was found with excrement all over her body, KKK, nigger written all over her torso. The medical records show she was unconscious. All of the testing proves she was not feigning that. They did not test her for rape, as you stated, because they picked her up as homeless. We have the facts and the evidence that an assistant district attorney and a state trooper did this. Mr. Cuomo and Mr. Abrams has done everything but call these people before the grand jury. They've even got an ex-friend of mine, tried to make him my aide, who's a very sick man. His family will expose that in the morning, to try to discredit a story he doesn't even know, rather than calling the assailants in front of the grand jury and making them face the music.
Now, Mr. Shaprton, you've raised a number of issues there. Let me pick up on one of the last ones first. You say tomorrow morning Perry McKinnon's family is going to reveal that he has what?
He has some mental problems. I don't want to waste our 6.5 minutes on all of them. I will say...
No, I don't want you to waste 6.5 minutes
all
either.
Right, well, fine. He has some mental problems. Mr. McKinnon has some a history of medical disorders in terms of mental problems. But Ms. McKinnon has raised some very interesting things. It was Perry McKinnon that gave us and CBS TV Local the information that Mr. Pagonis was hooked to the mob. They ran a story where Mr. Pagonis fixed licenses for liquor with the mob, and it was Mr. McKinnon who told us that this mob tie went to the governor, and it was the governor's mob ties, which is why he didn't run for president.
Yeah, now,
so if Perry McKinnon is a credible witness on Al Sharpton, then maybe he's telling the truth about Mario Cuomo, that Mario Cuomo couldn't run for president because of mob ties.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, at which point do his mental problems create a problem for you? Are you willing to accept any part of his statement then?
I'm not the one that brought Perry McKinnon public. Other people were. You should ask them that.
All right. Let me move on to Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason, you're an attorney, therefore an officer of the court. You understand that any accused has the right to confront his accuser. That's not being made very easy in this case, because your advice seems to be to the Brawley family that neither Miss Brawley nor her mother, Ms. Brawley, give any kind of testimony to the grand jury.
Ted, that's not what happened here at all. As a matter of fact, the family had fully cooperated with the authorities for a period of several days prior to the first district attorney, William Grady, telling the family, after they had given him descriptions, given him all kinds of information, that he had no suspects. They interpreted that quite properly to mean that he was not willing to arrest those suspects who in fact were named. He then cites an unspecified conflict of interest. David Saul is then appointed by Judge Hillary, who says that this case presents very difficult problems because it involves higher officials in the Dutchess County government. Let me interrupt you for one moment and go easy on us here, because you're talking to a national audience, and many of these names that you're mentioning here mean absolutely nothing to them. The question that I'm asking is, why is it your counsel to Ms. Brawley that she not testify before the grand jury? It's the same strategy that we used, Ted, effectively in the Howard Beach case. That is, we first cooperated with authorities until they demonstrated that they had no intentions of arresting or prosecuting or investigating the case. And a crime victim has a right at that point, a legal and moral responsibility, especially the mother and the daughter, not to participate in a cover-up. Bob Abrams talks about, we're in this for our political agenda. He wants to run for the governor. The governor, in fact, told us that, in addition to the fact that Bob Abrams has never tried a criminal case, has never prosecuted a case. We had another person who's on the show who will be coming on shortly, Mr. Hines, who Alton Maddox was responsible for creating the situation which allowed him to be the prosecutor in Howard Beach.
But he did a good job, didn't he?
He wants to run for mayor.
Didn't he do a good job?
No, Charles Hines wants to run for mayor. They always accuse us of having a political agenda.
Mr. Mason, my question to you is, didn't he do a good job? He got the conviction, didn't he?
He did his duty as a prosecutor. But the problem that we're having now, Ted, is this. Hines works for the governor. Hines works for Bob Abrams. Hines is now going around acting as if he doesn't know us at all. He was on Eyewitness News Conference on Sunday saying that Alton Maddox was spewing hate and anger. But the point being, in terms of the criminal justice system in this state, we have 62 county attorneys throughout the state of New York. All of them are white. We have a system, Ted, which you know because we've appeared on this program before, in which over the years it has been virtually impossible to get justice for blacks when they are involved with perpetrators who are white in this state. The government has done absolutely nothing on that.
Let me interrupt you because we got to take a break. I'll come back to you a little later in the broadcast, but when we come back immediately, we'll be joined by Attorney Charles Hines, who served as special prosecutor in the Howard Beach affair, as we mentioned earlier. State prosecutor for investigation of the New York City criminal justice system. He was, as we mentioned, special prosecutor in the Howard Beach racial confrontation case, a case in which 3 white teenagers were convicted of manslaughter. He joins us now live in our New York studio. Mr. Hines, what Mr. Mason said a moment ago is true. If it had not been for his tactics and the tactics of his colleagues, you would not have been appointed in the Howard Beach case. Are they not justified then in thinking it worked once? Why not try it again?
Well, let's assume that's true and totally accurate. The question is, though, that in this case, in Wappinger Falls and Dutchess County, nothing is different than the Queens County case. In both instances, the district attorney of the respective counties stepped aside. In both instances, the governor, Mario Cuomo, committed total resources to the investigation, gave me everything I needed for the case. In this case, he went one step further. He appointed one of the other 3 elected officials, statewide elected officials, Robert Abrams, the Attorney General. And Bob Abrams has committed himself and the resources of his office to see that the rule of law operates. And that's the thing we really have to focus on.
Now, Mr. Mason has said publicly, as indeed has Mr. Maddox, that one of the problems they have with Mr. Abrams is that he's never prosecuted a case before. Well, he has no experience.
I don't think that's the issue at all. Bob Abrams has dozens and dozens of superb trial lawyers on staff. He has a staff of 400 lawyers. And the fact of the matter is, he appeared in the grand jury at the beginning of the proceeding, has virtually moved his office out of Manhattan into Dutchess County, which gives a very clear signal that the elected Attorney General of the state of New York is ready, willing, and able to commit all the resources necessary to see that the rule of law operates just as it did in Howard Beach. And the downside of this tragedy is that this child, Tawana Brawley, is not going to receive justice as long as she's given the kind of advice that she's received so far.
Well, I don't think it's stating anything extraordinary to say that there are clearly some political motives at work here, and indeed Mr. Mason and Mr. Shaprton have admitted as much when they say, look, they have no faith in the criminal justice system, and that many blacks, if not most blacks, feel the same way. Therefore, they feel the need to change it. That's what they're doing.
Well, I don't think it does anything to add to the debate to talk about alleged political motives, Mr. Mason or Mr. Maddox or Reverend Shaprton. I think the important thing is to understand that nothing is different from Dutchess County than it was in Queens County. And the rule of law has to operate, and it can only operate, we can only get to the bottom of this if they agree to have Ms. Brawley cooperate with Attorney General Abrams. I think everyone wants to understand what really happened that awful night in November of 1980.
It's a few minutes over so that we have an opportunity to bring this conversation at least to some kind of a conclusion, but I also want to warn our guests we're not going to go very much over. Continuing our conversation now with the Reverend Al Shaprton and with Vernon Mason. Mr. Mason, you were interrupting just toward the end of the last segment there because you were disagreeing with something Mr. Hines was saying. What was that?
Ted, I just want to say this very, very briefly. Everything is different about this case. Here you had the first district attorney, William Grady, up in Dutchess County, who gave several $1,000s to the local NAACP. These were the initial lawyers who the Brawley family fired when they found this out and when they started discouraging them from pursuing this case. You also had involved, as Judge Hillary said, top officials of Dutchess County who were named as accused persons. Here you had a state trooper and assistant district attorney, the conflict of interest that Mr. Grady does not want to talk about. And it involved, not like Howard Beach, young kids who basically did what they did to Michael Griffith and to Cedric Sanderford and Timothy Grimes. But here you had the establishment of a major county in the state of New York.
Well, let me just interrupt you for one moment to make note of a rather tiny point, but it's an important one. These are the people that you and Ms. Brawley are accusing of having done that. They haven't had a trial yet.
But they have not been called for, Ted.
Hold on just 1 second. You heard what Mr. Hines said a moment ago, that before a grand jury, they would have the right to plead the Fifth Amendment, not incriminating themselves. Therefore, it's very unlikely that much is going to come out of their